All right, so welcome back. Today's six critical stories: West Asia, Urea, WTO, Forex, demographics, and children's digital safety. Let's go. So, first of all, we have the Iran threatens to close Strait of Hormuz. Now, Iran has issued a threat to completely close the Strait of Hormuz, the world's single most critical oil choke point, amid escalating US pressure. Now, this is the most serious such threat in years, and it lands directly on India's energy supply chain. Now, the Strait of Hormuz is a 33-kilometer wide passage between Iran and Oman, through which approximately 20% of global oil trade passes every day. There is no viable alternative route for the bulk of Gulf oil. Now, India imports approximately 60 to 65% of the crude oil from Gulf countries: Saudi Arabia, Iraq, UAE, Kuwait. Now, the strait also carries approximately 25% of global LNG trade, and India needs the LNG not just for power but as a feedback for its domestic urea plants. Now, the Strait of Hormuz is 33-kilometer wide choke point between Iran and Oman. SLOC is the sea lane of communication, critical maritime route for trade and energy. Strategic Petroleum Reserve is the India's emergency oil storage. Managed float is the India's exchange rate regime. RBI intervenes to smooth excessive volatility. West Asia crisis is the escalating US-Iran tensions, threatening regional energy security, supply, and the string of pearls is the China's network of ports in Indian Ocean, gives context for India's strategic anxiety. Next, we have the India's dual dependence on West Asia, urea. So today, uh, India's unique double exposure to the West Asia is to be seen, where India does not just import finished urea from Gulf countries, it also imports LNG from the same region to power its domestic urea factories. A Hormuz disruption hits both simultaneously. Now, India imports approximately 7 to 9 million tons of urea annually, about 30 to 40% of total consumption, primarily from Oman, UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar. Now, natural gas from imported LNG is the primary hydrogen source for India's urea plants through the Haber-Bosch process. If LNG supply from Qatar drops, India's domestic urea output falls. So the same disruption cuts both the import route and the domestic production route. So with Kharif sowing beginning May June, a supply disruption now would hit at exactly the wrong time. India's urea MRP is fixed at around 242 rupees per bag. The government absorbs the differences as subsidy. Now, urea MRP is the maximum retail price of almost 242 rupees per bag, fully subsidized by the government. And the LNG feedstock is the liquefied natural gas used as input in urea manufacturing through Haber-Bosch process. Haber-Bosch process is again the industrial process converting nitrogen and hydrogen to ammonia. It is a basis of urea production. Fertilizer subsidy is the government payment bridging the MRP and the actual cost. OMIFCO is the Oman India Fertilizer Company, and the food security is availability, access, and utilization of food at individual and national level. Now, why India opposes China-led WTO IFD deal? Now, India continues to oppose China champion investment facilitation for the development agreement at the WTO, blocking its formal incorporation into the WTO's institutional architecture. Over 130 countries support it. India, with South Africa, is the primary opponent. Now, WTO's mandate covers trade in goods and services and intellectual property, not investment. Investment governance belongs to UNCTAD. India argues that expanding WTO scope without consensus is a structural overreach that sets a dangerous precedent. Now, WTO decisions require consensus of all 164 members. The IFD proponents want to incorporate a plurilateral deal signed by only 130 plus members, right? So India introduced Press Note 3 in 2020, requiring prior government approval for all FDI from countries sharing India's land border, including China, effectively restricting Chinese investment. Now, the IFD's transparency provisions could make such screening internationally contestable. Now, IFD is again facilitation for department. China-led WTO plurilateral agreement on investment rules. Plurilateral agreement is basically WTO deal binding only on signatories, not all members. WTO consensus rule is all 164 members must agree. India uses this as its blocking mechanism. Now, Press Note 3 is 2020 India FDI policy requiring approval for investments from land border countries including China. Singapore issues are investment, competition, and government procurement. Developing nations block these at WTO since 1996. UNCTAD is UN body for trade and investment. Now, India says this is the correct forum for investment rules. Then we have the uh, India's forex reserves from 991 to today. So the Indian Express today examined how India has used its foreign exchange reserves to navigate global economic uncertainties since 1991, from pledging gold in a crisis to deploying $110 billion to defend the rupee in 2022. Now, this matters because in 1991, India's balance of payment crisis was so severe that we had to physically airlift 47 tons of gold to London as a collateral for emergency loans. Today, India's loans Today, India holds over $600 billion in reserves, fourth largest globally. Now, this transformation is India's most consequential macroeconomic achievement. Now, during the Fed's aggressive rate hike cycle in 2022, capital fled emerging markets, in, including India. Capital fled emerging markets, including India, and the RBI deployed approximately $110 billion in a single year, selling dollars to absorb rupee weakness, one of the largest central bank forex interventions in history. Now, this rule says that the reserves must cover 100% of short term external debt. India's short term debt is approximately around 250 to $280 billion. With $600 billion in reserves, India's coverage is comfortable at 2x. So the foreign currency assets is the largest component of forex reserves, held in US treasuries, euros, and other currencies. SDR is special drawing rights. IMF's reserve currency. India received about $17.9 billion in COVID era SDR allocation. Reserve tranche position is basically India's claim on IMF, part of the forex reserve calculation. Guidoti Greenspan rule is the forex reserves must cover 100% of short-term external debt. Managed float is India's exchange rate policy. RBI smoothens volatility without fixing the rate. And FEMA 1999 is the Foreign Exchange Management Act, governs India's capital account and forex transactions. Then we have the Andhra Pradesh total fertility rate and population policy. Now, Andhra Pradesh government is actively debating policies to increase fertility rates because Andhra Pradesh total fertility rate has fallen to approximately 1.7, well below the 2.1 replacement rate. Now, this reverses the old concern about overpopulation and raises urgent questions about delimitation and fiscal federalism. Now, the TFR measures average live births per woman over her reproductive lifetime. Now, replacement level is 2.1. Below this, population eventually declines. Now, Article 82 mandates redrawing Lok Sabha constituencies after each consensus. When the freeze since 1976 ends post 2026 census, seats will shift from population slow southern states who succeeded at population control to fast growing northern states. Southern states call this a penalty for success. Now, the 15th Finance Commission used 1971 census population for horizontal devolution, protecting southern states from losing tax share proportional to their lower current populations. Total fertility rate is the average live births per woman over reproductive lifetime. Replacement level is the TFR of 2.1. Population replaces itself at this level. Delimitation is the redrawing parliamentary constituencies based on population. Article 82 mandate. Dependency ratio is the ratio of dependents, young and elderly, to working age population. And the 15th Finance Commission is used 1971 census population to protect low TFR southern states in tax devolution. Then we have the demographic dividend, which is the economic benefit from large working age population. India's window is now. Last but not the least, we have the regulating children's social media, DPDP plus POXO. Now, India's debate on regulating children's social media use has intensified, centering on the DPDP Act 2023's child provisions and POXO's digital protection, with the critical gap being that the DPDP rules have not been notified yet, leaving the framework largely unimplemented. Now, Section 9 of the DPDP Act mandates that before any platform processes data of a person under 18, it must obtain verifiable parental or guardian consent. It also prohibits behavioral advertising and trafficking and tracking of children. This is stronger than most global frameworks. Now, platforms like Instagram and YouTube today serve highly targeted ads and recommendation algorithm to minors, shown to cause mental health harm. Now, DPDP bans this for under 18 users. Now, Data Protection Board of India, the regulator that enforces the DPDP Act, has not been operationally established yet. Without the regulator and without the notified rules, the DPDP's child provisions are legally valid but practically unenforceable. So, the DPDP Act 2023 is the Digital Personal Data Protection Act, India's comprehensive data protection law. Section 9 is the DPDP provision requiring parental consent for processing data of children under 18. DPBI is the Data Protection Board of India, adjudicatory body for DPDP violations, not yet operational. And the POXO 2019 amendment is the added online child sexual abuse material, CSAM, to criminal provisions. SSMI is a significant social media intermediary, platforms with greater than 5 million users with elevated compliance obligations, and age verification is the mechanism to confirm user age. So that's all. Six, right? Hormuz, Urea, WTO, Forex, demographics, digital child safety, all ready. Now revise and see you tomorrow.